served as preachers with a punch, and we have been punching hard over the last several weeks, and we're going to keep punching hard. Of course, that is something that we really enjoy to do. I am Dr. Nathan Street, along with...
I'm Pastor Alan Mashburn. Thank you for joining us. Today we have a candidate interview, and I'm going to turn it over to him in just a moment. He's going to tell us more about him. We have about himself, but we have John Morse. He's running for Superior Court Judge in Rockingham and Caswell County. He's running against a Democrat incumbent, and we want to turn every state red, but we want to make sure that every county is red in this state. So, John, thank you for coming on. It's a joy to have you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sirs, I really do appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a beautiful day.
Yeah. It is a beautiful day. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been in the county, what you're doing now, and what made you want to run for Superior Court?
Certainly. Well, again, I appreciate it. For one, we see where our country has been heading the past few years. I've been a lifelong conservative. I've always been a Republican. I've been raised by conservative Christian parents, and and I have two little ones of my own. And so we see this trend not only with the executive branch of our government and the legislature, but most importantly, judiciary. And we've seen what liberal activist judges what the harm they can have to our freedoms and to our Constitution. I am in Rockingham County. I have lived here for over 10 years. I was in private practice for the first 6 years, basically representing clients in both civil and criminal cases in district and superior courts. And for the past close to 5 years, I've been serving as the Rockingham County attorney. So I've been serving the citizens of this county in that role, which has been a delight. But the way that God works is He puts these messages on our hearts, right? I mean, He gives us clear indications of, I'm opening a door and I want you to walk through it. And so, sometimes I kick and scream, but at the end of the day, God is going to have His way with us. And so for me, it's a big faith issue. Not only do I want to make a stand for conservative values and our heritage and the foundations of our Constitution, but I also want to provide a great. I want to be able to stand up and my kids can look and say, "Dad stood up for what was right, what was true, what was biblical in our culture." And as a judge, I mean, for me, of course, we hear judges have to be impartial. We have to hear the facts. Every party has their constitutional right to have their day in court. But at the same time, I want the underlying factor to drive me, both on the bench and off. And that is what Christ has done for me and what Christ has done for the world and what the Bible spells out is this is how God has created us to live. And so, as you can see, I'm very passionate about that.
John, what do you say to those people? I can tell that faith is really the foundation of what you believe, and that does, I am sure, play a lot into how you would rule as a judge. What do you say to the people who would respond back to you and say that faith and religion should have nothing to do with how you rule and how you conduct yourself?
Well, sure. I'm one of my favorite. I will answer this by mentioning one of my favorite justices of all time was Antonin Scalia, and what he always reiterated when he was debating, when you looked at a Justice Breyer, someone with a complete different judicial philosophy as Scalia, what he would say is that structure, as required by our Constitution, must be adhered to preserve our freedoms. And that without adhering to the structure, so something along the lines of our Bill of Rights is, if we don't follow that structure, is essentially worthless, right? What he called it is basically a parchment guarantee. So the way I look at it is we have to, as judges, rule stay within our lane, so to speak. Make sure that we're adhering to the structure as required by the Constitution. I would be, of course, as a judge, would not make laws from the bench. See, that's the problem. We've seen activist Democrat judges who have imposed their own views from the bench under the guise of legal interpretation. And so as a conservative judge, my philosophy is that you have to start from the beginning. Okay, we look at the text first. We look at the text of the Constitution. We look at the text of the laws, but we have to go back to what was our foundations, right? And for me, what I get really excited about, and I'm sure you gentlemen have heard of wall builders, is that we have to go back to the foundation to understand what was our society like at the time when this document was ratified. What did our founding fathers believe when they drafted this document and ratified this document? They were men of faith, and we understood in the context of what they fled from. And so we have to look at the Constitution as a judge, interpret it through that lens. And the one thing that I can say that I've been so inspired by and encouraged by is the fact that we have a majority of originalist judges at our U.S. Supreme Court. So refreshing to see them hitting the reset button and saying, we're going back to the text of the Constitution, and we're going to take it even further. We're going to look at the original intent of our founding fathers, and we're going to start from there. Mm-hmm. And my concern is, especially being a father of two little ones, what is our nation going to look like 10 to 20 years down the road? The further we move away from our identity and understanding what our foundations are, we lose our identity as a country, which is a scary thought. And what I would vow to do is adhere to the law as it's in front of me, interpret it, and not impose my own views or beliefs. And so what we see, though, is when we see these liberal judges, if they impose their own views, it's essentially chipping away at our liberties and gives the judge no basis or no right constitutionally to do that. So
what do you say to the atheist or the guy on the left or the mainstream media who would say your biblical worldview is going to cross? Because let's be blatantly honest. The left's worldview affects their decisions, obviously. They are not originalists. They are not constitutionalists. They believe in arbitrary law based upon how it's going to affect the society, how culture has changed. And so it's basically rewriting the Constitution as we go along, which equates to legislating from the bench. But how do you respond to that? And being a Superior Court judge, I'm going beyond that because I can see you one day being appointed to a higher office or running for a higher office. I want you to. I want people like you doing that. In fact, we need a great attorney general, by the way, if you know anybody running. So, I mean, how do you approach that? I don't see how it cannot cross over because it defines who you are. But at the same time, the Constitution was written by men who feel the same way you do. So bring us up to that. There's a struggle, and the majority of it is spiritual.
No, I agree. But and this is the way. Before I jump in, I don't want to get too far off track, but I was raised in a conservative Christian home. My father is a retired pastor now. He's still preaching in retirement, but he's in the pulpit for close to 50 years. And so, what I view my father. Yeah, I remember I had this struggle. You talk about faith. I had this struggle in college whether to go to seminary and go full-time pastoral ministry or go into law school. And my father did not. I remember the day I went to him, I said, Dad, I think I want to go to seminary. And he sat me down and he did not scare me away from it, but he instilled in me the importance of having a genuine calling from God to go into full-time pastoral ministry. And so I did a lot of soul searching there. But I view this as if God opens the door for me to enter to wear the robe and sit on that bench, That's also a calling. That's a high level of responsibility, right? And so one of the great opportunities I had in law school was to be trained as a Blackstone Fellow. And I don't know if you've heard of the Blackstone Fellowship, but they're a program with the Alliance Defending Freedom, which has been on the front lines with the cases such as the recent Dobbs decision. And so, very conservative group. And one of them, so past faculty have included such as Ed Meese and now sitting Justice Amy Barrett, who was on the teaching faculty. Now, she got drilled right during her confirmation hearings in front of the Senate on her associations with a program like Blackstone. And their argument was, how can that not impact your decision as a judge and influence you that way? And she had excellent remarks with this. And I think as a judge, I'm going to have to follow her lead because she answered it so eloquently, is the fact that she mentioned that I taught lectures on originalism. That's her judicial philosophy in the line of Scalia. However, she said, the other materials and everything that went through the Blackstone, which is is training Christian lawyers for their legal careers. She said, however, that will not impact my decision as a judge. And I believe that even though I have strong religious convictions, I still have to be a judge. There will be laws that I won't agree with, that I'll struggle with, but it's not my job.
I think that's key. I think you just hit the nail on the head. You've got to interpret the law as you see it, not the way
That's the
you desire
legislature's
it to
job.
be.
And we've seen Roberts do that on a number of occasions. He rules by the law. Our Chief Justice says, if you don't like it, vote him out.
Yeah,
That's true. And I think that we've got to also understand that some of these, what Pastor Mashburn was talking about a minute ago, with how how leftists view the court, we've got to just be completely honest here and say that they have a religion. Even atheists, that's their religion. It's secular humanism. And so when you try to interpret the Constitution and try to interpret law through whatever prism that they want to put it through, whether that be critical race theory, whether that be atheism, whether that be Christianity or Islam, whatever it is, there is a prism that everyone's going to put their interpretation through. But the question is, and I think you're hitting the nail on the head, John, and you've got the right approach to this, is you're not putting your interpretation through any prism, but what the founders, their prism was most likely to be, which was a Judeo-Christian foundation. It isn't anything else but that.
Yes,
right
absolutely. And I tell you, the most dangerous that I see, one of the most dangerous aspects of this that I see is when we have judges with the idea that the Constitution as drafted in the 18th century is out of date and it doesn't apply today. That is one of the biggest threats to our freedoms and to our country right now.
100%.
same thing people are saying about the Bible. It's out of date.
Right. And this is why, the Republican Party is not perfect by any means. But when you look at it, it's the party that mostly aligns with my convictions and my values. I'm all for traditional family, right? I have two beautiful daughters. When we see something along the lines of a male competing against natural born females in athletic events, that makes my blood boil. I mean, what is our culture? Where are we going with this? And when do conservatives stand up and say enough's enough? I mean, if that was my daughter, of course, I'm just very upset on behalf of those females that work hard and they're deprived of that honor, right? But if that was my daughter, I mean, on this stage, I would be very, very upset. I mean, but so at the time, I view as stepping up and being a conservative judge and upholding the original intent, the meaning, the true meaning of our Constitution, as a way of me standing up for what's right and what's true, and what our identity as this country. When I go out and speak and I mention that, like this is our identity as a country, I get so many blank stares. And I'm thinking, do y'all understand what I'm telling you?
Yeah.
I mean, John Adams said, he said, look, you will never know how much my generation has sacrificed for your freedoms. Make good use of it. And so, I mean, why can't we go back and see how much they lost and sacrificed and died for us?
Amen.
Because we have intentionally stopped teaching U.S. history.
Exactly.
Intentionally.
It's the
And
truth.
embraced Marxism, which entails critical theory, critical race theory, and so on and so forth. So we're reaping what we have sowed as a country in many ways. And that's another topic. It's not on topic for you, but as a believer, you recognize
Yes, sir.
it, you see it. But the law has to play a part in that, because if we don't abide by the law and use the law as our plumb line, then we have
and that's why I'm
chaos.
so relieved. I tell folks, one of the greatest things that Trump did was he did a phenomenal job with judiciary appointments and nominations. Excellent. I think in large part, I know that I'm sure he received a lot of counsel from the Heritage Foundation, which is a wonderful organization. But at the same time, it's so refreshing to see our highest court saying, like, for example, with the Roe decision, there's no basis in our Constitution. There was no justification, constitutional basis for the court to rule that way. Now, of course, I never thought I'd see that in my lifetime. But, praise the Lord that we have a court that is hitting the reset button and going back and saying, what does the text say? But even further, what is the original meaning and original intent of this document? That's just so encouraging to me. But again, folks will also argue, well, that's for the federal court, right? I mean, they hear most of these constitutional issues anyway. And I said that is far from the truth. We need judges at the state level, from the highest court to the lowest court, with that same judicial philosophy. It applies here, especially if they're on an issue such as abortion. The Supreme Court has thrown that back to the states and say, okay, state legislatures, you need to figure that out. So of course, this is going to be coming before state judges. We've already seen it happen in Kentucky. And so again, I have strong religious convictions and beliefs on that. For me, I'm taking off the judicial candidate hat right now. I'm excited that, and I hope this ushers in a season of celebrating life, right? And so from that angle, but again, we need to have conservative judges that start at that point at our state level. If it comes before me, all right, what does our Constitution say? What was the original intent behind it? And how do we apply it?
That's I love it. That is exactly the kind of philosophy that we need. And I'm glad that you answered one of the questions that I had, in knowing that abortion is a big topic that is coming our way. It is coming to North Carolina. I'm kind of disappointed in our leaders, Tim Moore and Phil Berger. I'm very disappointed in them for not taking up the issue, even though they could easily say, well, we've got a Democrat attorney general, we've got a Democrat governor. Doesn't matter. You should always do the right thing all the time, and you should take up the issue. I know here in South Carolina, where I am, they've been battling the issue. Unfortunately, we've got weak-willed Republicans down here that don't want to take it even further. But you are competing. Your opponent is Ed Wilson, who is already the judge for that area. What can you tell us about Ed Wilson and how he has
Sure.
decided cases, and how are you
Yeah.
different
So I will start off by saying that I've known Ed Wilson since I've been practicing law here. And when I first announced that I was running, when I filed, the very first thing I said was, personally, I have respect for Ed Wilson. I mean, he's always been very gracious to me, very kind. But I go on to say it's nothing personal. We have drastically different platforms of which we're running on. I am very much a Christian, conservative, Republican. I've always been conservative. I don't know any different. Um, my opponent, he's been a lifelong Democrat. We've seen certain things that have been revealed, of course, that confirm that he's on that platform. Now, how he has ruled, he has had, and I will be honest, he has had some decisions that have been, somewhat conservative. However, there also have been some decisions where, it's there's probably some political leans there. But I think for the most part, what the basis upon what I'm running, irrespective of decisions that in his track record, what does the man stand for? Now we have these judicial races that are partisan. They used not to be. Now I believe they started. I think judicial races started to be partisan back in, I believe it was 1868. But then we've had recently a several-year period where they have been nonpartisan. So we've had several liberal Democrat judges who have been able to be reelected in rural areas, in conservative Republican areas, because they haven't had to disclose their party, right? And so they, in a lot of ways, they can present themselves as being conservative, but are they really conservative? And I'm excited now that judicial races are partisan, because I believe that at the very least the public has the right to know the political leanings and the beliefs of their candidates. I want to know who it is I'm voting for, not only how they're going to rule on the bench or how they're going to carry themselves in office, but who are they out of the office, off the bench, right? What do they believe in? Mm-hmm. That gives me greater comfort. So I think for the most part, what I'm running for is the fact that what you see with me is what you get. All right, Rockingham County, I believe they went 73% for Trump. All right, you're a red county. You deserve to have an option to vote for a Republican. What you see with me is what you get. I am a conservative through and through, and I will not change. And the other option is you have a lifelong Democrat who's going to remain loyal to his party.
Here's the thing. Alan, I'm sure you caught this too, but I want the listeners and Rockingham County citizens to hear this well. John Morris, when he just described himself, he didn't bat an eye. It wasn't a political speech. But when he described himself, I caught it. That he said, I am a Christian, conservative, Republican. Did you notice what comes last in that lineup and what comes first? He is a Christian, conservative, Republican. That makes the most difference that he's got his order in his list in the right order. And so those of you who are Republicans, I'm looking at you, Phil Berger, who decided that you were going to go and you were going to put politics above faith and above ideology and above your own party. And you go out and you endorse a Democrat, a lifelong Democrat. And we have seen from the Democrats that they are going to put party above country. They're going to put party above faith. They're going to put party above their ideology. Party is everything to them, very much like true Marxists are. And that's exactly what it is, the party first, because they're going to get their liberal elites, their rich white liberal elites. That's what they're going to get, is you're going to get all the goodies coming from you all. Folks, you're going to need to have a Christian, conservative, Republican on that bench for this war that is coming our way. It is a war on our faith. It is a war on our way of life. It is a war on American values. And Ed Wilson may be a great guy, but at the end of the day, if he's not willing to leave the Democrat Party, he's already putting the party above you, the citizen, knowing that this county is red and is conservative. Folks, you deserve to have a good candidate, and you deserve to give Phil Berger the boot if he's not going to stand up for someone who should be perfectly aligned to his own ideologies and beliefs and to stand up for them. John, tell us who has already endorsed you, because I think this is important for our listeners who respect a lot of the people that are on this list, and we do
Sure.
too. Who has
I
endorsed you
will.
already?
So I've been very, very blessed in that regard. The North Carolina Federation of Republican Women came forward and endorsed me, and of course I'm very honored with that. And so that's a big one. And then we have former member of Congress and U.S. Congress and Pastor Mark Walker. Mark Walker is a
friend of ours.
I tell you, if all of the representatives and individuals I've seen carry themselves, Mark Walker is a man of faith. And so I'm just really pleased and honored that he would come out and support me. And then we have also have an endorsement from our Lieutenant Governor, Mark Robinson. And I saw him at our GOP event last Saturday. And I went up to him and I said, hello, Lieutenant Governor, how are you? And he looked at me, he said, oh, you're the one who, and I said, yeah, I'm the one. And so I was like, but I would really be honored if you would endorse me. And so I'm thrilled that God has put these individuals, these organizations, in my campaign. And I also will mention I've received great support also from Chairman Watley from the NCGOP. And he's reiterated that the party is behind my race and for what I'm standing for. And I'm going to also mention, I always have to put a plug in for the one person who inspired me to enter public service, and that was our late Congressman Howard Coble. And I knew him. The one funny story is when I first met Howard Coble when I was in law school. He walked up to me, he said, "Man, you've got a lot of hair." And I thought that was quite funny. But he said, but again, Howard, Congressman Coble said, he always told me, and I've heard him say on numerous occasions, is that political winds are always fickle. And so, going back to Nathan, what you were saying, it's so important that we encourage Republicans to get out and vote. Conservatives need to go out and vote, especially when we have such these high the Supreme Court race and the Court of Appeals races, but especially the Supreme Court race, are so important. And so we've got to have these rural red counties show up and vote to carry the day against these larger urban, more heavily Democratic counties.
You're right, you're right, and I don't mean to just to sort of use the whole time here, but I think that this is important to point out that and this may be a bad analogy, but I'm going to use it anyhow. I think of Russian roulette. And so you were right when you said that not every, Republicans are not perfect either. But if I'm thinking of Russian roulette, all right, the bullet chamber, if you vote for a Democrat, the bullet chamber, you've got 6 bullets in that chamber. You're sure enough going to hurt yourself by voting Democrat. But you might have 1 or even 0 bullets in the chamber if you vote for a Republican. Yeah. So, folks, not every Republican is going to get it right, but at least you're going to get it right, and you're going to help yourselves, citizens. You're going to help yourselves a lot better if you're going to vote for the most conservative person on that ticket. They're the ones that's going to do the right thing 9 times out of 10. And so you're 9 times out of 10 or 10 out of 10 with a Democrat, you're going to get something awful. So it is important that you guys understand that when you go to the ballot box to cast your vote. And so I want to just really stress that we're not going to back up any good old boy network. Phil Berger, you got your friend out there, and you're going to put friendship above your state. You're going to put above your party and a friendship above your ideology. All right, that's fine for you to have your friends, but we're not endorsing Good Old Boy Network. We're endorsing the person who is going to be the candidate who is the most conservative and give the best shot at getting conservative values and adherence to the law. And that is John Morris from everything that I have seen and everything that I have heard. So we really encourage you all to do that. And John, we just want you to speak to the audience, speak to the people of Rockingham County, Caswell County. What is it, if you had one chance to get them to understand one thing about you, what is that thing you want them to know?
Well, I think what I mentioned before is that what you see with me is what you get. One thing that I always want to be known for is a man who keeps his word, right? I mean, a man's word is everything. If I make a promise, I follow up with it. I want to be consistent. But I ultimately want them to see and know that I'm a man of faith. That the Lord's work in my life has been so clear. You know, I've had seasons in my life where the only thing I've had to grasp onto is God's every word. And I mean, when you get to that point, I mean, your life is just life changing. It's amazing to see. I mean, and really, what we see happening now at all levels, at our church, in the church, and in politics, and you see this on the bench, is that there's a spiritual warfare going on. There's a lot going on behind it. And one thing that I would like to tell folks, I always love what Scalia said when he says, you know, have the courage to have your wisdom regarded as stupidity. Be fools for Christ, and have the courage to suffer the contempt of a sophisticated world. You know, we have to follow leaders like Scalia. The man adhered to our Constitution. He was an advocate for it. He was a bulldog for it. I mean, he didn't back down to these liberal elites that tried to, you know, it's almost like you listen to it and you listen to some of these liberal jurists or like, and it's almost like they hear Scalia and in response, they're like, well, does it really say that? I mean, it kind of takes me back to the book of Genesis, right? Where it's like, well, did God really say? Well, you know, our founding fathers, you know, they put this document in place. They were brilliant. They knew what they were fleeing from, and it's not perfect, but it's the best in the world as far as that document and the structure that we've got.
Amen.
They had seen all the tyranny, they knew the cost, and they were still willing to pay it. And if you don't stand up to tyranny, it'll beat you every time. So let me say this. Rockingham County is predominantly red, correct? All right. You've been endorsed by all of these folks, and all of these are good folks. They're good friends of ours.
Yes.
In addition to Dale Falwell, he's helped you a lot, correct? So, folks, let me tell you something. And I want everybody in these two counties to listen to us, because the Democrats are the party, and they have pushed us to this edge. This is no longer politics as usual.
Right.
This is a fight for the republic. John is a good man. He has to remain nonpartisan in his office as much as possible. There's lines he cannot cross, but there are no lines we cannot cross as citizens. The Democrats are the party that wants to defund the police. The Democrats are the party that wants to do away with quality of life crimes and quit enforcing laws to certain groups of people based on the equity of what equity needs. I want to take that word equity and shove it down the biggest commode in the world and flush it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they want to release the convicts. They want to make felons to be able to vote. They want to do everything that is against the originalist view of our Constitution. If you want to maintain law and order, then you need some good things intact. One thing you need intact is a good Superior Court judge who will rule from the bench according to the law.
Yes.
And so I want you to vote for this guy. I want you to put him in office. Phil Berger, I have no idea what you're doing, but this goes back to the establishment here. They still think we can get things done. Politics as usual. The GOP doesn't know how to win elections. They don't know how to win battles. They just know how to play politics.
Exactly.
They think they're playing checkers when in fact it demands a mind to play chess. So I'm sick and tired of that. We're to the point where we've got to stand. We're on a cliff and we're getting ready to go off. We have got to stand. We've got to have men and women who are leaders, who are Christians, who are conservatives, who are Republicans, and put these folks in the office to regain order and to shut out completely and eradicate chaos. So vote for John Morris. You will be joining the likes of good men like Mark Walker, Mark Robinson in endorsing this man, but you must do it at the ballot box. And let me tell you something, pastors in Rockingham and Caswell Counties. You are the gatekeeper to many of the people who would vote for this man.
Yes.
You need to be influential to them. You need to make sure your congregation is, one, registered to vote. And then we need good Christian people in office, but we need good Christian people voting for people in office. And so the last election, they say that 60% of the evangelical church were not even registered to vote, or they didn't show up to vote. Folks, that election was not stolen. We gave it away. 100%. Get your butts up and vote for John Morris.
I agree. And I also add to that. Democrats are the party that want to allow your children to be hacked up into pieces so that in the name of gender ideology.
Yes.
Democrats are the ones that want to take your children and sacrifice them to their secular humanist gods in the name of abortion. These are the people that have a D after their name. You know what they stand for. I don't care what they say. That's what their party stands for. That's what they're going to abide by. We've got a man here who is going to vote and he is going to judiciate, I should say, not legislate, but he is going to judiciate from the perspective of what the Constitution says and what the founders who wrote the document intended for it to be. Yeah. And that's exactly what we need in this country. Don't hand this state or this country over to a party that is so lawless. And Pastor's right. We can't continue to compromise with a party that wants to see Christianity and people like me jailed because we stand up against this evil that they are trying to foist on our children and on our state. Yeah. They want to see us dead because we believe in what we believe. We cannot compromise with a party like that any longer. So sorry, Senator Berger, sorry, Berger family. Judge Wilson might be your friend, but he is no friend of Rockingham and Caswell Counties. He is no friend of North Carolina, and he is no friend of the Constitution. And it is time for us to dump those people who are no friends. And if you want to be a bird of a feather and flock together with him, Senator Berger family, perhaps it's time we dump you too. Folks,
and if you've got a D behind your name, you're no friend of ours.
No friend of ours.
I can't speak for John, but I'm speaking for Nathan.
I would like to mention this, what Nathan has just said is, one thing that I share with I have two beautiful girls, little daughters, and the one thing that I reiterate to them is Psalm 139. You are wonderfully and fearfully made by the Lord. Hallelujah. And we've got to instill that identity into our children. They are created by the Lord. How offensive of it is it for our culture to intervene and try to call the shots on what God has created? Amen. I mean, it's just...
Amen.
You bring up a great point, and sooner than later, you're going to have to face this as a jurist because California's already started a law, and this is a whole different podcast, and maybe we'll bring you back, but next week we're going to be talking with Congressman Walker about this. California's already signed into law, Emperor Newsom, who wants to be president, not Grandpa off, but he's already signed into law that you can take children away from the homes, the parents, if parents don't support gender identity in that child, and if they believe that the parent will never come around, they can permanently remove that child. We're going to have to make laws in here to counter that in this state, and they're going to be
and of course,
lining up before you
as I'm
sooner
sure you've
than
heard
later,
other judicial
sadly.
candidates speak to, I can never give you any sort of indication of how I would rule on any sort of hypothetical situations. But I can say this is that
Obviously,
I
yeah.
know that there's a higher power that I'm accountable to. And I mean, just the same as my father being a pastor,
Amen.
same with a judge, and same with our life's work. We are accountable to a higher authority, the creator of the universe.
Amen.
Right.
Well,
So Nathan, Dr. Street, I think we've already mentioned it. We can endorse this guy.
Well, I'm honored to have
we
their
can endorse this
endorsement.
guy.
I really
think
am.
100%.
All right, let's go on record.
We are on record as endorsing John Morris for Superior Court Judge Randolph.
No, Randolph County's already
Rockingham
red.
County and Caswell
They're
County.
red now.
I'm a Randolph. Yeah, that's right.
Oh, yeah.
We're the red. I'm a Randolph County boy, so we were the reddest. So so that's we definitely encourage everyone to go out and vote for John for Superior Court Judge. It is very vital that we get folks like this, a man of God, a man of principle, and a man of understanding, a man of the law, who honors and respects the law on our Superior Court circuit. It's very important that we do that, folks. And so, look, I know that we are running long, but I think it's important that we have shined the light here on everything. And I also want to say that that what Pastor Mashburn and I, what we say on this podcast are our views, are not the views of John necessarily. He expresses his own views. We don't speak for him. So if any of the Republican Party that comes out and wants to crawl all over our case for calling out Phil Berger, that's all right. You can take it up with me because I'm the one that said it. I live in South Carolina. Bring it on. So you don't scare me. I'd say it if I lived in North Carolina. Don't bother me at all. So, folks, and I have
He's a troublemaker, guys. He's a troublemaker.
Stir that pot. I love it. I love to stir it. So, folks, listen. We appreciate John for coming on with us today at Carolina Conservative Preachers with a Punch. We definitely want to have you back on again, John, and we'll talk about some of these legal issues that might come up later on. Hopefully you will be on the bench by then. And we continue to talk to you about anything that comes up. We'd love to have you back on. You've been a wonderful guest. We really appreciate all of you for joining with us again. Let's fight together. Let's continue to push back against the evil. The Bible tells us that when evil comes in, when the devil comes in like a flood, that we lift up a standard against him. Our standard is the Word of God. And on this podcast, we are lifting up the Word of God like a shield of faith to blow back against the evil that is flooding in our nation and in our state. That shield are people like John Morris that we need to lift him up, hold up his arms, and let's help him fight in this battle.
Thank you
again for joining us today on this podcast and this week. Absolutely. We look forward to having you all again next time. I am Dr. Nathan Street.
And I'm Pastor Alan Mashburn. Thank you for joining us. Vote for John Morris. God bless you until next time.
God bless.